Hello and welcome to the second and final part of the series on how to build the Age of Empires town center. My name is Victor and this is a video from Hurdu Scenics. The first part covered how to make the structure out of foam, so in case you haven't seen it, I encourage you to do it before proceeding. The second video covers painting and details. At the end of the video, you'll see the outcome of more than 20 hours of work. The first step in painting is really easy. The goal is to cover all the pink with black. I'm just using some cheap black paint and a large brush, and my goal is to cover as much of the pink as I can, ideally everything. The paint is not diluted. I might use a bit of water every now and there to get in the corners, but otherwise I'm just applying paint liberally without thinking too much about where it goes. You can't really mess up this step unless you don't cover all the pink. Using a dark brown, I'm covering the black parts that are supposed to be wood with this paint. I'm not too careful about applying it in all the corners. I actually want some parts to be black because that will create a more realistic looking wood. I've decided to apply the wood paint first and then the paint that goes on the walls for a reason that I'm not sure if I liked at the end or not. The idea was that if I make a mistake and I get paint in places where it shouldn't be, like for example if I paint wood and the brown paint goes on the walls, that would be a bit awkward because wood doesn't really like go on walls. However, if I paint wood first and then I do the colors that represent the paint on the walls, you could say that paint got onto the wood and that looks much more realistic. It's a bit more complicated to do wood first and then the paint on the walls because you have to work with a very small brush and get in little spaces with it. But I don't know, I kind of liked it, I think. I'm still on the fence about it. But here all I'm doing is just applying brown paint all over and trying to not cover the walls with brown unless it's supposed to be wood there. Using the same brown, I'm doing the Canopy wood pieces and I'm trying to cover as much as possible of the areas that are visible, but if the underside and the parts that are not visible to everyone are not fully covered, I will not worry too much. I was debating here if I should have done the painting before putting the roof. I think that could have worked, and I think I would have gotten a better coverage on the wood pieces. But other than myself, I don't think anyone else will notice that some of the beams on the underside of the roof are not covered by brown paint. Using a very light gray, almost white, I'm applying paint over the wall pieces. I'm trying to cover as much of the black as possible at this step while not touching the previous wood colored parts. It's a bit of work, especially when you get close to the edges of the wood, and I'm doing my best here to not make mistakes, but you will see that every now and there white spills onto the wood pieces. This is what I was talking about. If you spill white onto wood, it looks like someone did a poor job painting the thing, and it still looks realistic. While if you would have done it the other way around, wood would not spill into the paint, so it would look, well, less realistic. At this step, you can use a big brush to cover most of the parts, and then you can take a brush with a very small tip to get into all the crevices and small spaces that require a lot of detail. A small brush really helps here, and while it takes a lot of time to cover all those little areas with paint, it was probably one of the most enjoyable parts of this model, especially when you look at it sped up. I think, I don't know, it's just satisfying. For the shingles, I'm going to use a lighter brown than what I used for wood. I believe this was honey brown, and the goal is to cover the black of the roof as much as possible with this. You will notice here that there are pink parts visible through the black. Unfortunately, those parts were really hard to cover with this brown. This is what I was telling you earlier in the video. I believe it was in the previous part of this series. I applied glue before putting the shingles, and then the glue that's visible through the shingles cannot be covered with paint. Unfortunately, Mod Podge and acrylic paint don't go together. Maybe there is another paint that can be used to cover Mod Podge, but whatever I had did not work. It's not the end of the world. I don't think too many people will notice the pink through the shingles, but as the author of this building, unfortunately I notice all the details, and yeah, it's quite annoying. Using lighter browns than I used for the wood, I'm going to dry brush almost every part of this building with a bit of lighter brown. The goal is to just create a bit of variation in those wood beams and just make it look more realistic. On the floor itself, you can do a bit more lighter brown on certain areas that you think will get more high traffic. For example, the top part of the stairs where the stairs end will probably get a bit more brown, and then on the outside you can think of like where you will get more either human interaction or nature takes a toll of those parts. So anything that's exposed to nature directly will probably need to be a bit lighter. It's funny how when you build models, you build them perfect initially and then you make them dirty. So basically you destroy all the work you've done before. In this step, I'm using water and black paint to create weathering on the walls. The goal is to cover all the clean parts with darker water that will pull into corners and joints of wood, so that it looks like the building is not pristine, but rather it's been there for a while. There's no recipe to this, just apply it liberally, however you see fit. And every now and there, I'm also using a bit of green with water, especially for those areas that might have been exposed to the elements, parts that got rain on them. Those look really well when you apply green on them. You can also mix green and black and create this building in a way that you find looking good. My foam cutter cannot cut a 17 by 17 piece of foam, so I actually did it from four identical pieces. I cut 4 squares and then I'm gluing them to each other. In order to create a bit of reinforcement, I'm going to apply a bit of paper in between them and glue that will create a bit of strength and will make them support the entire structure. Luckily, foam is not very heavy, so the building itself is quite light. But I think this technique, I haven't done it before. I don't know where I came up with. Just sound like a good idea. So far, looks like it's holding. I haven't had any issues with the base bending or anything like that, so it works. Once the glue dried and I painted the whole base in black, I'm just going to apply liberally Mod Podge all over the place, and this will act as the glue that will hold the soil onto the base. The soil is just potting soil that I got from outside. I baked it for about an hour and a half in the oven to remove any sort of organic materials, and here I'm just trying to cover the whole surface with it. Don't worry if it's not even or if it has anything through it. We're going to make it better later on. I used a bit of painter's tape to mark where the buildings will go, and I've also attached a few rocks that I made with plaster using molds from Woodland Scenics. What I'm doing right now, using a bit of light gray, tan and yellows, is to create a bit of variety on that soil. I'm trying to think how this building will actually be used if there would be, humans going all over. So in those areas where humans walk more, there will be more yellow, and in the areas where humans don't walk, there will be probably grass. So under the grass, I want some dark brown, and under those areas that get foot traffic, there will be lighter areas. Around the rocks, probably, since this is an Age of Empires building, the villagers will walk around it, collect gold. So there's a lot of foot traffic. Also where the steps of the main building are. And then in those areas where humans don't walk, I'm going to keep the original brown. Here I've started applying grass. This is scenic grass from Woodland Scenics, and I'm using an applicator to make the grass stay vertical. I'm just applying glue randomly, and I'm trying to not cover the whole thing with grass, but rather create patches. If you create patches, the grass looks more realistic, because if you look in nature, grass is not everywhere. There are spots where nothing grows. I'm trying to do the same thing here, and I'm even trying to get a bit of grass in those areas with high foot traffic, because even if you have a lot of human traffic and grass gets stepped on, there's still some that survives, and you will see it every now and there. Using a lighter gray than the base color, I created some texture on those rocks. If you're interested in seeing more of how that's done, see my other videos where you can see a more detailed tutorial on how to create realistic looking rocks. Because foam doesn't hold its shape very well, I ended up recurring to a solution that I haven't done before. At the bottom of every pole of the main building and the canopies, I'm going to attach a toothpick. These are just toothpicks that I cut in small pieces. They will be used for guiding the building into the board and making sure everything stays in place. I found that otherwise it's too hard to glue the board and the building, and the legs will not be straight. If you've played Age of Empires, you know that we have stone and gold in the game. I want this one to be a gold mine, so using a bit of gold paint from, I believe this is Art Deco, I'm just gonna apply a few patches of gold. This is metallic gold paint, and it will look really good if you shine light on it. Another distinctive element of Age of Empires is the player color. In this case, I'm going to create that beam of made of blue, because this is for the blue team. Again, if you make the building yourself, feel free to use a different color, but do consider that the game only had a limited selection of colors, so use one of those. In this case, I'm using true blue. That's the closest I found to be to the color used in the game. Moss and vegetation was not part of the original building in the game, but I did find it more interesting to add some details to it. So this is my own contribution to it. Using a mix of Mod Podge and water, usually I do a 3-to-1 ratio 3 water to 1 part Mod Podge. I'm just liberally pouring it over the roof and then applying some turf from Woodland Scenics on top of the roofs of the buildings. There's no pattern, I'm just randomly doing it, and I'm using a combination of light and dark green turf. I think if you have a bit of color variation, it does it looks much better and it makes it look more realistic. We're getting close to the end. We're still missing one critical part of the building. How are those humans going to get inside? We're missing the main stairs or ladder or whatever that thing is. So here I'm cutting a few pieces of foam and I'm going to build a ladder that's about an inch thick, wide. I'm trying to create the sides of the stairs to go just around the hole that I cut in the floor in the beginning of the video, and then each step of this stairs will be the same width as the cutting in the floor. Well, I could get more precise and use some sort of measuring tool to get the right angles. I found that just eyeballing the angle of the stairs and the steps is good enough, and probably no one will notice that some of them are not perfectly aligned with the ground. So here, just using a bit of hot glue, I'm randomly, not randomly, just kind of placing those steps in the right places given the number of steps that I have. Just like with all the other wood pieces in this building, I'm going to paint everything brown, and then I'm going to use lighter browns and white to dry brush the whole thing. Think when you build these steps that you will probably want more weathering and more dry brushing in those areas that get foot traffic. I've also cut 16 window blinds, and those are just rectangles that are a bit textured with a metal brush and then painted brown. Alright, now we're really getting close to the end. You can get a feel of how the final board will look like. Here we're gluing all the details to the board, we're gluing the buildings, and we're trying to complete everything. So first step, glue the buildings in place and then put some weights there to hold it while the glue dries. Then I'm going to glue here the steps, and then finally the window blinds will be attached to every window. Remember, you have 16 of those, so it's quite a bit of work, but if you have a hot glue gun, that will not be too much work. If you got all the way here, I want to say thank you, and I really appreciate you for watching this video. You've watched about 16 hours of footage that I've recorded, probably about 20 to 24 hours of actual work, and everything was condensed in about 50 minutes or so. This is the final thing. It turned out pretty good. Here you can see I've actually added a few more details that you see in the game. I've added a few crates and barrels and a cartwheel, and there's a bucket on the side. Those are the things that you actually see in the picture on the left, and that's how it looks in the game. Now, a bit of shameless plug here. If you are interested in those crates and barrels that you see there, I'm actually selling them on my Etsy store. But you know, you don't have to do anything. But if you want to buy them, hey, go ahead. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I'm actually thinking about doing one more video about the things that I don't like about this building and that I would have done differently. There are quite a lot of things I think I will do differently in a future build. But overall, I think it looks pretty good, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Remember, subscribe and comment, and I hope you have a great day